Hi, and welcome to Learn CueDB in 30-ish minutes. Let's get to it. The first thing you see when you log in is your dashboard. By default, it will show you your projects and your latest activity. In this case, we have a TV series with 2 episodes, followed by a feature film. If you're already familiar with the user interface for CueDB, you can skip ahead to around 9 minutes and 40 seconds where we will recreate this project from scratch. Otherwise, come along for the ride. This page is called the Cue Overview. At the top you have progress data and a progress bar showing how far along you are in the project. Next, we have our reels. If you work in long play format, it'll look something like this, with all the cues laid out in one long timeline. Next up, we have our timeline items, with each one representing a cue in the table down below. In the Tools menu, you can do things like import cues, and export a cue sheet for PROs. The Filter menu contains the most commonly used filters, allowing you to filter by licensed music or compositions and more. To get back to the full list of cues, click All Cues or the Clear Filters button. From the View menu, you can make appearance adjustments. For instance, you can make your rows larger or smaller. Use the Auto mode to size the rows to the content. On the right-hand side, you can use the Quick Search field to search cues by, for example, cue number, cue title, status, and more. Clear the search field by clicking the X or hitting backspace to bring back your full list of cues. If cues are no longer used in the cut, but you want to keep them for reference, use the eye icons on the right-hand side of the table. Then, click the toggle button to show or hide inactive cues. These cues will be excluded from the composition totals. You can easily reorder the columns by using drag and drop with the column headers. If you drag a header upwards, it will snap out of the table and disappear when you drop it. To bring it back, click the hamburger menu that appears when you hover over the column header, search for your field, and check the box to bring it back. It can be handy to pin a column to one side of the table. You can pin a column to the left or right side of the table, or choose no pin. Let's unpin the status column. It now scrolls with the rest of the columns. But if we pin it to the left, it will remain in place. We already looked at the main filter menu, but you can also filter by individual columns. For example, by cue status. You can uncheck the boxes to clear the filters. Use the column handle to change that column's width. Standard cue sorting is done by in-time and cue number, but you can change it by clicking the column titles. At the bottom of the screen, you'll find View presets. Each project comes with a few defaults, but you can customize these however you like. A preset contains columns that are selected for a certain workflow. Let's take a look at the Cue Sheet preset, which is designed to fill out and export cue sheets for PROs. As you can see, it contains writer and publisher columns, sequential cue numbers, and other columns that are dedicated to the cue sheet. Now let's head back to our standard preset. We've already seen how we can add and remove columns from a preset. Now let's look at it from a different angle. In this view, it's easy to see which columns are active or inactive in a preset. Use the search box to search for a specific column, then click on it and it'll jump to the active section. You can click on an active field to make it inactive, and you can drag and drop a field to any position you want. If you've made too many changes and you want to get back to where you started, you can click on the CueDB Defaults menu, followed by Reset Current Changes. You can also use any of our defaults as a starting point for your presets. If you want to be sure that no one on your team changes your columns, you can click Protect Preset. When you're happy with your changes, click Update. But in this case, we don't need to save. Next up, the Stats panel. Open it by clicking the Stats button at the bottom of the screen, or hit Ctrl-Shift-S to toggle. At the top, we have our Cue totals. Anytime you see a square, you can click on it to select corresponding cues. In this case, it's compositions. If you instead click on the title, it will filter the cues by the corresponding category. In this case, it's licensed cues. And you can shift-click to add other options to the filter. You can clear the filters by clicking on the categories again, or you can go to the filter menu and select Clear Filters. Next up is the progress section and the per day minute count. In order to calculate how much you need to write per day, we first need to set some deadlines. Let's set one up now for composition, and let's give ourselves about a month from today. As you can see, CueDB has calculated that we need to compose about 1:25 of music per day and revise about 6 seconds of music per day. Not too bad. This info also shows up in the header stats. Let's also take some weekends off, because we don't want to work weekends. This will immediately and automatically subtract 4 days from our totals. We now need to write 1 minute 38 seconds per day and revise 7 seconds per day. Still not too bad. Only you can see your days off, but if you want to hide them from the main stats, uncheck the main stats checkbox. As for the rest of the stats panel, you can see stats for status, cue type, substatus. It lists frame rate and runtime, as well as themes and instrumentation. If you work as part of a team, you can also see stats for individual writers. Here we have 2 columns of composers, with cues assigned to each of them, Erica and John. You can hover over their headers to get detailed stats about each composer's workload. Now let's take a look at the theme column, where you can add one or multiple themes to each cue. By default, timeline items will be color-coded by status, but you can switch this to theme colors if desired. And if you have multiple themes for a cue, it will be split into multiple colors in the timeline. For now, let's switch the timeline colors back to status. Another time-based column is instrumentation. These tags can be assigned a duration and scheduled for recording sessions. While the cue's full duration may be 3 minutes, you might only need to record 32 seconds of strings or about a minute of brass. We'll dive deeper into instrumentation tags in a bit. For now, let's move on to cue versions. A cue can have any number of cue versions, complete with its own set of data. Click on Cue Details or any cue's thumbnail to open Cue Details view. You can find all your cues listed on the left, and you can click on one to see its versions in the next column over. Here we have a v1.2, which is in orange text to indicate that it's an older version, along with a v2.0, which is in white to indicate that it's the current version. There can be only one current version per cue. Data fields on the lighter background, like version timecodes and version number, are saved per version, while data fields on the darker background are saved per cue. And next, over to the right, we have the collaboration panel. The production channel is intended for conversations with the production team, like the director, editors, and so on. The composition channel is intended for internal communication amongst the music team, and I'm sure you can guess what the next 2 channels are for. Now let's close the Cue Details view so we can take a quick look at the picture page. Here we have all the reels listed, along with all the picture versions. If you work in the long play format, it'll look something like this, with just one single item. We'll talk more about picture later. For now, let's take a quick look at project settings before we wrap this segment. Here, you can change the project title, duplicate the project, delete the project, invite or remove members, change member privileges. You can add or change colors for statuses. And under Fields, you'll see all the standard fields, and you'll also be able to create custom fields as well. Now, let's recreate this whole project from the ground up. To start, let's head back to the dashboard by clicking the Dashboard button at the top of the page. Click on New Project. You will then be asked to identify the project's owner, and unless somebody's made you a core member of their team, thereby granting you access to create projects on their behalf, your name may be the only one on this list. Now select the project type and fill in the project's title. The production name just to the right will be generated automatically, though you can change it to whatever you like. It's usually a unique 2 to 4 character long name. For picture type, select long play if you work with one long video file. For our project, we're going to work with reels. Frame rate already looks good, and you can change the number of lanes in the timeline if you have a number of overlapping cues. Adding a thumbnail like this is optional and can also be done later. Adding deadlines is also optional and can be done later as well, though it is encouraged so you can get an idea of your per day minute counts. If you're not planning to review media in CueDB, you can deselect this option. It will remove the media player and simplify the interface. To add a member to your project, either select an existing member, as shown, or type in their email address and press Enter. You can also add members later, and you can change membership permissions and other options whenever you want. And if you want to add a message to accompany the invitation, you can do so here. Once everything looks good, click Create Project. And here we are, but no cues. We'll get to that. First, let's set up some reels so the cues have somewhere to go in the timeline. And if for some reason you need to change picture type, you can do so here. If you don't yet have picture, you can fill in NA for not available and leave the picture timecodes as they are. For now though, let's click Nevermind and switch back to reels. You can create reels one by one, or you can use our new turnover feature. To do so, first select the number of reels you want to add. Then add the picture version. Dates are encouraged but optional, and then click Next. On this page, you can add as much detail as you like. For our purposes, however, we'll just click Save. And look at all those beautiful reels. Let's go back to the Cue overview. The reels we just created now show up in the timeline at the top. Time to add some cues. There are 3 ways to do so. The first is via the New Cue window, where you can fill in as much or as little information as you like. The status box is separated into 5 different categories: unapproved compositions, approved compositions, on hold and omit, which will exclude a cue from stats, song, which will count the cue as an original song, and license, which will include the cue in the licensing totals. Since we have already added our reels, the first reel will automatically be selected, though you can add a cue to any reel you want. Enter your in and out time codes, and the duration will be calculated automatically. The sequencer start time code is optional. It represents where your video export starts for this cue. It may be before the in time code where the music actually begins. Once everything looks good, you can either hit Save to save the cue and close the window, or Save plus New Cue to keep the window open so you can add another cue. The cue numbers will increase with each new cue, though you can change them to whatever you like. Now let's check out the next method to add cues. If you prefer a spreadsheet type layout similar to that of Excel, click Tools and New Cues. Enter the number of cues you wish to add, and select which reel you wish to add them into. Since we already have a 1M1, CueDB will automatically suggest that we move on to 1M2 for the next cue. Let's remove those cues. You can select them using the checkboxes on the left, then click on Tools and Delete Cues. Confirm in the pop-up that you want to delete them, and then check to see that they're gone. Now let's dig into the third and most efficient way to add a batch of cues. Once again, we're going to click on Tools and then Import Cues. You can choose what format you'd like to import, be it Excel, CSV, Pro Tools, Logic Markers, Cubase, Reaper CSV. For now, we're going to go with Logic Markers, but the process is similar for all of them. Ordinarily, we'd copy these from the marker list in Logic Pro. Here, we have them ready to go in a text file. Copy and paste them into CueDB, then click on Preview. Because we already have a 1M1, CueDB will mark that cue as Update. This means the time codes for 1M1 will be updated while everything else about that cue will remain intact. As for the rest, they'll be imported as brand new cues. Our previous 1M1 was named Main Title, but the one we're importing here is called Leaving the Shore. You can uncheck the title checkbox if you wish to keep the current titles as you have them. Otherwise, they'll get replaced by the imported data. By default, only markers with valid cue numbers will get imported from your marker list. When you're ready, click Import. And there you go. If a cue ID ends with an S, CueDB will automatically mark that track as license. You can change the status manually after the import. Everything else will be assumed to be compositions, marked to write. Written to picture will be empty since no versions exist yet. Current picture will be automatically mapped on import based on cue number. Let's assign some cues to our composers, Erica and John. We'll assign a few to each composer and speed up the video. All right, now you'll see that if we hover over the composer columns, we can see how much music each composer is assigned. Now it's time to add some themes. Type a theme title and press Enter. Let's add another one. And a third one. Let's assign some colors to the themes. You only have to do this once, though you can change them anytime. This seems like a good color. If needed, you can add more than one theme to the same cue. Now let's make some space and jump into hyperspeed. As we already know, we can change the timeline colors to reflect our themes. This makes it easy to see how our themes are spread out over the entirety of the project. Next up, instrumentation. It's a good idea to add instrumentation tags to anything you think you'll record live. For now, let's add some strings. We'll enter a duration if it's shorter than that of the whole cue. And now we'll add a second one for our next cue, woodwinds. And a duration as well. We'll come back to these later. Let's start writing some music. Let's update the status of 3 cues to in progress. You'll notice that the composer columns will also change to reflect the new status. Now let's assume we've written a cue. Click on Add Version and enter the cue's version number. The picture version will be automatically set to reflect the current picture. Status will be set to compose, and our current timecodes will be copied to the version timecode fields and stored for this version. If you're planning to review media in CueDB, you can also add a media file at this stage. Paste a direct link to your media file, and the media will be added to the cue automatically. Click Save to save the version. Since we added media, it will be marked as To Be Published, and a new button will appear to publish cues for review. If you elected to disable the media features in project settings, the media panel will not be present. And you will not see the media player at the top of the cue details view. Let's go back to where we were. We're going to add a new version for our second cue. We'll make it v1.1. We'll add a media file to this one as well, and save. For our third cue, let's undertake the same process, but this time we'll use the Add Version button from within the cue details view. As you can see, we don't have a version added yet. All version fields are currently blank. So let's click Add Version and make it v1.4. Let's now add a media file and save. And our version fields are now populated. Let's invite some production members so we can share all this beautiful music. We can close out of Cue Details and then click on Project Settings, followed by Members. As you can see, we currently have 2 composers and 1 music editor. Next, we'll click Invite. From here, you can type an email address and press Enter, or choose an existing member. It's recommended to invite production members as viewers, though you can also add the approver role if you want them to be able to approve cues through CueDB. Steven is now added to our project. So let's publish this first batch of cues. Click on Publish. You can tweak these settings as needed or leave them as is. If a member is set to receive email notifications under the project settings, they will be pre-selected in this box, but you can of course add or remove any member you wish to notify or not. Hit Publish Selected and the cues will be marked as published. The Publish button will disappear and the emails will have been sent to the selected members. You may wonder, how does it look for a client when they log in? This is what the Viewer preset is for. Click the Viewer button at the bottom of the screen to see a simulation of the Viewer preset. Only columns that are active in the Viewer preset will show up by default. They can see some statistics, but no progress information. Their view is more minimalistic, and you can add and remove columns just like any other preset. Let's remove the Scene column from their default view. Viewers have read, but not write permissions to columns. When you're done, click End Viewer Simulation to return to your standard view. Let's take this one step further and log in as the director. We can see that 3 queues have been published, so let's open the project and check it out. Here, you'll notice more changes. The preset bar is gone. They only have access to one viewer preset and its respective fields, and there is no option to add or remove columns. Viewers also have new tags that show up if there's anything new to review. By default, the only column they can edit is the review status, and unless they're assigned the Approver role, the Approved button will be disabled. Viewers can open queue details by clicking the button in the upper right or on any queue's thumbnail. Now, let's pretend that this video had some awesome music. Viewers can leave comments in the comment section. As you can see, they only have access to the production channel. As the composer, you can elect to be notified via email when new comments are posted or when queues have been marked approved. If the timestamp checkbox has been checked, the comment will appear on the timeline at the corresponding timecode. Seems like we might have a revision. Well, that should be doable. Thanks, Stephen. As they click through the new material, the new tags will disappear, so it's easy for them to track what has or has not been watched. They can also hover over the reviewer columns to get the latest info as to when something was viewed, approved, commented on, and so forth. Now let's log out and log back in as the composer. And we're back. If the reviewer column is active in your view preset, you'll be able to track reviewer activity. Now, let's update some statuses. This queue is going to go to orchestration, and for 1 and 2, they asked for some cowbell. Sounds like an easy revision to me. The stats at the top have been updated to reflect this new information. But just when you thought life was easy, a new cut arrives. Head over to the picture page. In this case, we can click New Turnover. If desired, you can fill in the picture version date, and then click Next. In this case, we're going to leave all the reel data as is. We now have multiple versions of each reel logged into the project. You can click Edit Versions to see them all at once. The current picture version will be highlighted, but if needed, you can change any version to be the current version. Back in the queue overview, the Written to Picture text has changed colors to indicate that the queue was written to an old cut. Let's pretend we addressed that cowbell revision, and we're ready to present another version. CueDB will automatically step it up to v2.0. Written to Picture is now set to the latest cut. We're going to skip adding media in this example, so if you want, you can reset the review status. Let's click Save. Written to Picture is now updated to the latest cut, so the text is white. If desired, the substatus can be changed to be presented, so we know we need to add a media file and publish the queue. Now, let's skip ahead and assume that several queues are ready for recording. We can start by selecting some queues. From the Instrumentation menu, select Strings. To avoid a mistake, you'll have to confirm batch updates by clicking the Confirm button twice. The Strings tag has now been added to 14 more queues, so we can hit the Deselect All button. Now, let's do this one more time to add some brass. It's a good idea to add duration info to all your tags in order to best plan for your recording session. It can be a bit tedious, but it's just one of those workflows that's difficult to automate. We're now ready to check out the Sessions module of CueDB. Start by creating a recording project. A recording project can contain one or several sessions. If you're recording music for an existing project, like in our case, keep the Yes option selected and select the project. If you're recording for a freestanding project, hit No. All members, except for viewers, will be invited to your recording project, and you can add and remove members as you wish. For example, you may want to add a recording engineer to your recording project, but not to the composition side. Once the recording project has been created, we can add a session. Let's add a strings AM session. Fill in the date and start time in the time zone of where the recording is taking place. Fill in session duration in hours and minutes. Many scoring stages are already available in CueDB, but you can of course add your own location if desired. The time zone is automatically updated when you change location. It's a good idea to add session instrumentation, which will become clear in a minute. For this session, we'll be recording strings. Now let's create an afternoon session by duplicating the first session. Let's update the title. And let's change the start time to 2 p.m. We'll also change the duration to be a 2-hour session, and the rest can stay as is. Now let's open up our recording project. We can see our two sessions side by side, detailing our recording order. You can click on one or the other to view that session only, or you can shift-click to select multiple sessions. When adding starts to your recording orders, it's easiest to show just one session at once. Click Add Starts, and you'll see a familiar list of cues from our connected project. If you have multiple connected projects, you can select which one you want to display. By default, only compositions will be visible, but if you want to show licensed music and original songs, you can choose All Cues. Since we tagged our session with strings, it'll be easy to filter all the cues that have strings. We can now start adding cues as starts to our recording order. To do so, click the Add button. As instrumentation tags are assigned to recording sessions, they'll light up. Based on duration, priority, and difficulty, CueDB will estimate the start and completion time of your starts. Starts that are marked as more difficult or assigned a higher priority will be allotted more recording time. This one change gave us 3 more minutes to record our first start. You can also drag and drop starts to change the recording order, and start and completion times will update accordingly. You can of course add breaks, which will reduce the actual recording time. Place breaks where you expect to take them, but this can change as you go. You can also add custom starts that are not related to a specific cue. For example, string effects, improvisations, a different version of a cue, and so on. The link symbol tells us that a start is linked to a cue. No link indicates a custom start. Click to add a duration for your custom start. If there is no instrumentation tag duration, CueDB will use the cue version duration. If needed, you can always enter the duration manually, in which case it will be displayed in indigo. Let's move on to our strings PM session, and let's filter to only show unscheduled cues. From here, you can batch add all visible cues from the Options menu. Now all our cues tagged with strings are scheduled for recording, and we can be certain that we have not missed a cue. Let's add a break to this session as well. Next, let's look at our recording sessions next to each other. In this example, we ended up with some pretty extreme numbers. We need to record 8 minutes of music per recording hour in the morning and 15 minutes of music per recording hour in the afternoon. If needed, we can drag starts between the two sessions to balance things out. In this example, it's still a ton to record, but you get the idea. When it's time to record, you can click the Notes button to open the Take Notes view. You can fill in pass, bar, pre-take notes like more vibrato this time, and take notes on the take itself. Click New Take with same bars if you're recording the same spot again. You can rate the takes with stars. And you can click the green New Take button when you're ready to record a new segment. Top-rated takes will be marked in green. When you're done recording a start, mark it completed. If this was updated during the actual recording window, completion time would be marked automatically. But since it wasn't, I'll update it manually. Let's say we finished 10 minutes after we started. The estimated completion time for remaining starts will be updated accordingly. From the Options menu, we can export recording orders and take notes. Let's exit the recording module and head back to our project. Scheduled tags will show up with a microphone symbol, and completed tags will show up in green. The final step for most projects is to create a cue sheet for PROs. So let's check out the cue sheet preset. For this example, let's keep it easy. We'd like to select all compositions, which, as we've learned, we can do from the Stats panel. Click on the square next to Composition and all compositions will be selected. Now, click on the Writers column. In the Add Writer field, select a name from the list or create a new one by typing a name followed by Enter. You can hit the Split Equal button if all writers' shares are equal. Since we also want to add publishers for the selected compositions, we're going to click Maintain Selection. Now, click the Publisher column and repeat the process. And now that we're done with writer and publisher shares, we no longer need to maintain the selection. Next, click the Tools menu followed by Export Cue Sheet. CueDB is currently offering two cue sheet formats, Rapid Cue and Music Force. We recommend the Rapid Cue template, but both formats will export an Excel file. Let's take a look. While we're at it, let's check out our other export options. From the Tools menu, click Export Cues. The cue log is the closest representation of what you see in the cue overview. It can be exported as a PDF, Excel, or CSV file. Select one and click Export. This is what the PDF version looks like. You can choose if you want to include music totals and progress information. Next up is the wall chart. This is similar to a cue log, but has fewer fields available. It also combines data into fewer columns. For example, we have cue number, cue version, title, and status in one column, and duration, time codes, and picture information in another. Version notes is a list of all versions of all cues. Since we don't currently have any version notes, we can skip this export. Now, to wrap things up, let's magically mark our whole project in the beautiful green of completion. This is what we're all looking for. Gorgeous. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you need any further help, just shoot us a message. Thank you for watching, and happy cueing.